Jiu-jitsu definitely, I mean, people can get into all kinds of weird stuff, right? People get into surfing, people get into skiing, people get into rock climbing. There's definitely something more in jiu-jitsu that gets into people's heads.
Yeah.
And it definitely happened to me. I mean, I was completely, and I still am. I mean, I still cannot like stop a YouTube video of a cool move. I mean, I just have to watch it.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there's such a cerebral part of it. There's something about it. And I see this, we teach kids, and you'll see the knucklehead kids, the kind of knuckle dragon kids are kind of big. They don't really get it. But then you get this kid, like some smart kid that you can tell they're smart. And those are the kids that get really into jiu-jitsu because they realize like, oh, if I learn this, I can beat that big kid.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts. But yeah, jiu-jitsu can definitely be addictive.
Well, jiu-jitsu is the only martial art where it really works like in the Bruce Lee movie.
Yeah.
Where the little guy really can beat the big guy.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, like, if you watch the old K1 days where Bob Sapp was fighting, when Bob Sapp was 375 pounds with abs, like you've never seen anything like it. Was he on steroids? He was steroids. There was nothing human left. And he beat Ernesto Hoost twice, who is arguably one of the top 2 or 3 greatest kickboxers ever. And Bob Sapp just bum rushed him and Donkey Konged him. Just beat him down with clubbing punches because he was so much bigger than him. Yeah.
And to your point, I was in Japan. I was with Dean, as a matter of fact, when Nogueira submitted Sapp.
That was insane.
That was insane.
That was insane. That was a perfect example.
Perfect example.
But boy, it had to be Nogueira, though, because Sapp dropped him on his head, pile drived him on his head.
I saw him the next day, Nogueira, like after the fight, and he was hurt. I mean, he was beat up bad.
The point is that in jiu-jitsu, like maybe in MMA, it's a little bit different because, obviously Bob Sapp dropped Nogueira on his head, and most people would have been done then. But Nogueira was legendarily tough. But a small man can tap out a much larger, stronger man on a regular basis. Yep. I watched Rico Rodriguez in Abu Dhabi go against Marcelo Garcia.
Yeah. I was there. Were you there?
Yeah, in L.A.? Yeah, it was awesome. Amazing.
Yeah.
And when Rico threw him on his back, when Marcelo took Rico's back, boom. So Rico threw himself backwards and slammed on top of like Marcelo's like a backpack on Rico's back. Rico's like 240 something, maybe even heavier. Threw himself backwards and landed all his weight on Marcelo. Marcelo shook it off and leg locked him.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Incredible. I mean, Marcelo was like 160 pounds, maybe 170, maybe. Yeah. But just so skilled and so dangerous with his jiu-jitsu that he was the favorite in that, which is incredible.
And that's where I think that addiction comes in, because I think it's just a cerebral thing where people realize that it's, like you said, it's this real force. One of my kid asked me, you know that movie The Incredibles?
Yes.
These people have superpowers, and my son asked me, hey, Dad, is there really such a thing as superpowers? And I'm like, jiu-jitsu.
It's definitely a superpower.
It's a superpower, And if you remember the days before anybody knew it, if you knew a little tiny bit, man, you were just no one could stop you. It was awesome.
What year did you start?
It was 92 or 93.
Damn, you got in early.
I got in early. Luckily, I had a...
Pre-UFC.
Yep. We knew when we watched that first UFC, we all knew. Well, there was 3 or 4 of us that knew that Royce Gracie was going to win.
Royce. That's amazing, man.
We had this old SEAL Master Chief, old Vietnam era SEAL Master Chief named Steve Bailey, and he was like a high level white belt, and he had trained with Florian Gracie up in the garage, up in Torrance. And so he knew jiu-jitsu.
The garage, the infamous garage. It was like the epicenter of jiu-jitsu.
No kidding,
in
it's
America.
Crazy. Yeah. But this guy, Steve Bailey, had trained there. And, one day we were over on deployment over in Guam, and he said, hey, who here wants to learn how to fight? And I'm like, yeah, I want to learn how to fight. And he just took us all and just choked us all out, I mean, like, okay, you attack me, and just choked us all out. I'm like, okay, I'll listen to whatever this guy's saying. So he taught us, the basic, like the rear naked choke and the arm lock and like the Americana or something, like, we're talking like 4 or 5 different moves. And with those moves, like I every scrap I'd get into, I'd just force someone into the rear naked choke or force them into, but they had no idea what was happening. So it was actually amazing. But again, I thought at that time that was jujitsu. Like there was this finite thing.
A lot of people did.
Yeah. And then you realize, that it's completely unending and it changes every day.
Jean-Jacques Machado had a guy that moved to black belt, and he was a very good martial artist. He was very physically strong, this guy. He was a big, like, bulky dude, like a naturally big bone, strong guy that gave people a lot of problems, and then decided, and like didn't just decide this, but said it publicly. I've learned all I can learn about jiu-jitsu, and now I'm going to learn all I can learn about Muay Thai. And everybody just went, oh, dude, we're done with you. It was so ridiculed in the jiu-jitsu community and in the people in Jean-Jacques school that everybody, like, I was like a blue belt at the time. Like, you learned everything? How can you learn everything? There's no end. Yeah. Jiu-jitsu doesn't end.
Yeah.
It goes on forever. Like, you can always get better. It's not something until you achieve the speed of light.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's another great thing about jiu-jitsu is because it, like combat, it reflects life. And if the day you start saying that you're good to go, like in a leadership position or whatever task you're working on, the day you say, I've learned everything there is to learn about this, is the day you start to lose. And I know that humility is something that you have to keep yourself in check because, again, I got asked the other day, when were you at, when was your high point of leadership? And I'm like, I never had a high point of leadership. I was always trying to learn. I was always trying to figure out what I was doing wrong and what mistakes I was making. Because if you don't do that, that's something I learned from jiu-jitsu. If you don't do that, then you're going to get passed by and other people are going to figure some new way of doing it and you're going to be left in the dark.
Yeah, as much as I like to use like the term "that was perfect," there really is nothing perfect in human beings. There's always room for improvement. There's always a shorter path. There's always a quicker victory. There's always there's always new things to learn. And as soon as you start thinking that you've mastered something to the point of an end, like you kind of missed out what it's all about in the first place. It's all about, you're constantly uncomfortable. You're supposed to be constantly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then in these little victories that you get, the good thing about when people tap, you get I get a little nice feeling right here.
Yeah.
I get,
and then they're like,
right.
Let's go again.
The point is that it's a long path, a long, arduous path. And I think anything that's worth doing is probably like that.
There's no doubt about it. And that's another piece, again, another place where jiu-jitsu is like life is you think... At some point, you think like you think you're good, you think you're doing pretty good, and then you just get smacked. You get smacked with something. And like now, like when you were 25, you were like, I'm pretty good to go. I pretty much know what's up. And then when you're 30, you're like, I didn't know anything when I was 25.
Yeah, I was an idiot 5 years ago.
Yeah, and it's true. Like and so I think one of the things that provides some small portion of like maturity as a human being and as a man is when you get to the point where you actually realize that you don't know everything and you're like looking at yourself like, I'm 44 and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to learn so much in the next 3 years, 5 years. I'm going to look at myself at 44 and go, yeah, you see how stupid you were then? And when you come to that realization, I think that's a pretty positive thing because it takes a while to figure out that, hey, you don't have everything figured out. You're pretty stupid right now, even though you don't think so.
Another thing that things like jiu-jitsu teach you, and I say jiu-jitsu, but it's really an all martial arts thing. The problem with the other martial arts, other than jiu-jitsu, is at a certain point in time, you can't really practice them 100%. Yeah. Like striking. Yep. You really can't practice striking 100% for very long, or your brain starts to give out. It's just a fact. Yeah. And jiu-jitsu, you can. Jiu-jitsu, you can do it deep into your 50s. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's like, or Anthony Bourdain, he's pushing 60, he's still doing it. And, it's not that he's going to be a world beater, but he can get the most out of it. The most that he can get out of it, that stays the same. Like what you get out of it stays the same, regardless of regardless of the success. Like what you're getting out of it, even if you're getting tapped, what you're getting out of it is doing your best and overcoming and improving upon what your best is every day. And doing so in a situation where there's extreme consequences. You're going to get strangled. You know, you're going to get your arm broken if you don't tap. It's not as extreme as combat, obviously, but it is as extreme as you can get in a sport that you're participating in, an activity that you're participating in voluntarily in America at 5:30 on a Tuesday, where you're going to get 30 people that are going to show up, slap hands together, and then hug it out after it's over, and go, "You going to be here tomorrow?" "Yeah, all right, I'll see you, man." And then, you know, back again tomorrow, same thing.
That's another kind of primal piece that makes jiu-jitsu so intense. Is if you and me roll, like, and I get you, or you get me, and I tap, in my, like, heart, I know that if you and I were fighting for survival, I just lost, and you'd have killed me. And I see this with little kids. When little kids compete, you tell them, "Hey, listen, just go out there, have fun. It's going to be fun. You know, just go out there and do your best. I don't care if you win or lose. Just go out and have a good time." You tell them that, you tell them that, you tell them that. If they get tapped, they start crying. It's so emotional. And why is that? Because a part of them inside their head that they don't even know exists knows that that person, had they been in a mortal struggle, they got beat.
Yeah, it's not like someone, this is what I always say, like, somebody dunks a basketball on you, that sucks, but it doesn't mean anything unless you decide it means something.
Well, what does basketball escalate into? What do all
Fights.
sports escalate into fights?
Yes.
So if you, let's get rid of the bat, the ball, whatever else, let's just fight. That's why it's, you know, that's why I think the UFC has been so highly successful, because it's the ultimate, you know, in combat sport, again, you know, barring combat itself.
Yeah.